Luke here from Following Strength. We're joined by Alex Jose from RP11 Strength, coach to some of the world's best strongmen. How are you
Aaron,
doing, man?
I am well. I am well, man. How are you today?
I'm having a great day. I'm having a great day. Starting 2026 strong with someone like yourself with us. Um,
Oh,
how was how was 2025 for you, mate? I know you traveled the world.
it. Oh yeah, we can get into it. It was a very busy year, and in all in very good ways. I was just talking to you prior to the recording. I think I did I'm pretty sure I did like between 19 and 23 weeks on the road. I think it was closer to 23 on the road, and it was all strongman related. Um, Goodness, I mean, I did. I think I coached two or three shows in Canada. I coached a show in Norway. Scotland, England, U.S., obviously, all over the U.S., which is way too big of a country. But just everywhere. I went everywhere. Iceland. So I spent a lot of time on the road this year, more so than I ever have, and it was incredibly fruitful. It was incredibly fruitful. The athletes did incredible, all from like amateur to pro, and I definitely think my game evolved even more this year, which is good. I keep on running into things I don't know, which I think is a good thing ultimately. But it was a very busy and fruitful year, I would say, for the athletes. I am personally tired, but the athletes did great.
What were the highlights from those countries? Iceland must have been beautiful.
Oh yeah, I mean, depending on how deep I go into it, it was just really the highlights for me on a little bit more of a macro lens. Was just seeing that the system across the board that I've developed is consistently working amongst weight class and open men. So from the very smallest to the very largest, both men and women. Because I use very much a systematic approach when it comes to program design and coaching. And ideally, as a coach, as you develop your system, it's not it's okay if it's good for just, let's say, one section of the sport. Maybe you have a real niche on 90 kilo men, for example, right? That's good. There's nothing to be uh, feel bad about that. But for me, in my particular goals, I'm trying to develop a system that approaches all of it. Because I mean, for me, like the goal has always been simple: be better than everyone. I want to be just hands down. In 10 years, people look back like that coach had the most results, right? So watching the system work really well has been incredible. Um, Interestingly enough, as my career has gone on, I've had a really hard shift towards open men, not intentionally at all. In fact, you could go back on the very first podcast I ever did, whether it be my own or being interviewed. I actually poo-pooed the open division as often as I could because I was sick and tired of just hearing about open men in the sport. Because in reality, the totality of the sport has very little to do with the open men. Like where all the money comes from and the actual participation, very little is actually open men. So I was hyper focused on weight classes for a long time. But so for this year, watching the system work broadly was great. I had athletes win qualifiers in Canada to go to Magnus, and then that athlete won Magnus, and then I've had that experience alone was incredible. Watching that athlete flourish, Levi Strong flourish over the last year, has been great. And in Ireland, me and Lucas went to Ireland and spent, I want to say, 4 or 5 days there and meeting so many of the Irish strongmen and community. And we got to lift ancient stones in decrepit churches under the moonlight. And like, just there's been so many moments throughout this year where I went to Norway and I stood in a fjord in pardon me, not Icelandic, but in Arctic glacier water with my athletes before, like just kind of just amazing experiences across the board. So on a personal level, it was profoundly growing, and then in a very net positive way, the athletes did incredibly well. So it's hard to pick any one thing, but I would say maybe just the system developing across the board it was nice to see. It was nice to see.
That's incredible. How is it coaching multiple athletes at the same competition?
Well, it's funny. It's a question that's often asked. For me, it's fun, right? Because I am adamant with anyone that I coach. Like, you aren't join. I am not just your coach, but you are joining a team. I kind of very much have that mindset. You are joining a team, and one of the things that whenever when I reflected on the year just a couple of days ago, as New Year's comes, and as people do, they reflect. Hopefully, um, it was like something that almost brought a tear to my eye, knowing that, like, if I have athletes in different parts of the world, they will oftentimes meet up and train together, and they've only ever met because they happen to be on a team. Or when they travel to a different nation, they'll be put up by athletes that happen to be nearby on the team. So it's like that's something that I'm so proud of and something that I really encourage, that team type dynamic, because it makes them way better, like exponentially better, when they really kind of buy into that sort of thing. And it's certainly not for everybody, but it is for some. So yeah.
Are there any kind of things that really stand out for you that make someone a successful client? Take Lucas or Tim Buck or
Yeah,
anyone like that.
it's really simple. I can tell you right now how good you'll be by just how you fill out your spreadsheet where I put the program in. Like seriously, I'll know from week one. Like I'll know right away, like how good you'll end up getting, because there's just common traits amongst all winners. All winners are really good at losing, and they'll lose often, and they're really good at just following a plan. The hardest athletes I've ever had to deal with in terms of coaching have been the most talented ones. Those are the clients I frankly hate working with the most. Extraordinarily talented individuals because they don't work hard. They don't. And it takes them, what I find, like there's athletic maturity, which almost has nothing to do with their physical age. And amongst the people who tend to do the best are ones that are willing to buy into a system, like I previously mentioned, but more importantly, take every little thing seriously, putting in your notes, actually doing recovery things, actually going for walks, actually doing their blood work, right? And what you find with the hyper talented athletes, they have gotten by with the sheer talent, and they miss a lot of steps. They miss out on learning how to learn often. And learning how to learn is one of the most incredible fundamental things that will take you farther than you'd ever imagine. Like when people think of people that I coached at in the past that are really good, like I've coached Aaron Murray, I've coached Nez, I've coached people like Tommy Lavelle, I've coached obviously Lucas, um, and people probably think of more Lucas now when they think of my coaching. Lucas wasn't some fucking world beater when he started doing strongman. He was a regular local guy with 150 kilo log max. He could barely pull 320. Like it would be a struggle bus. He wasn't some like standout. But what Lucas is incredible at doing is appreciating a systematic approach to things, learning to find value in small wins, and just letting them compile. Never thinking about the end goal ever. I mean, when I first met him years ago at this point, it's about 4 years now I've been coaching him. I told him the first day I met him was like, you will be one of the best. Period. Hard stop. You will go down as one of the best. And he literally told me I was an idiot. He's like, dude, you're a fucking idiot. I was like, I'm telling you right now, in 2 years, you'll be near the top, and in 3 years, you'll be top three in the world. And it's exactly what happened timeline wise, in my opinion. Some people would argue if he's top three or not, but I don't care. They're wrong. Uh, but but and the reason why I made that assertion to him, that claim, was because he was an individual that was already towards, like, Lucas had already lost a lot. His whole athletic career, when he was doing track and field, throwing hammer and shot, when he was doing football, when he pretty much those two sports and other things, he never won shit. He was always second or third or fourth or second or third or fourth. And those are the athletes that I'm like, that's the one, because they will buy into a system and keep learning and growing and learning and growing. And they will surpass the genetic freaks. They every fucking time. The genetic freaks have like a 2 or 3 year window where they're the best in the world and they disappear. Almost every, doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. But the people that become obsessed with systems, dude, they take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite stats of all time is, I think, Zydrunas Savickas' first time at Worlds, he was 24, right? Did not good, like, right? He didn't win World's Strongest Man until he was like 34, right? So like that's a 10-year spread before he started winning, but he kept showing up, and now he's the GOAT, right? Now, obviously, in between that, he had some Arnold wins, and that's great, but for him to be like the guy that can win anything, it took a long time, right? So, and people forget that. It's not, and there's been, and even during his time, there were a lot of freaks that showed up. Oh my God, Kevin Nee's the next one. He's 19. He's at Worlds. Disappeared. Other people, oh my goodness, they're disappeared every time. So what I find, traits that really indicate someone highly capable of success, it's those who are obsessed with learning and being totally okay with losing. It's never the genetic freak. It's never the genetic outlier. I have coached NFL level athletic freaks before in strongman that you don't know because they burned out or they disappeared or whatever.
We have a saying in England, and hey, maybe it's a worldwide saying. I'm not sure we invented it. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Yeah, very universal, very universal. Now, every once in a while, you get an incredible talent that learns that because they can like those athletes can learn the process. It may take a little more time, but when they do, oh goodness, everyone that's how you get like a Michael Jordan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Mitch Hooper springs to mind, maybe.
Yeah, Mitch is interesting in that respect because to me, when he first came on the scene, to me he pegged me as an athlete. Oh, he's gonna be burned out 2 3 years, guaranteed. And he almost did. Last year was hard for him
Yeah.
for a myriad of reasons, but athletically speaking, strictly, you could see he was starting to fall apart a little bit. He had a few, pings in the bicep, a few pings in the hamstring, a few pings in the. He was doing a lot, and he got away with a lot because he's a fucking genetic anomaly. But more recently, seems like he's pulling back. So, he's one of those guys. If he keeps doing what he's doing now, goodness gracious, there'll be an era for his success for a long time. I'd imagine.
I fully agree with you. I was at Worlds when he debuted, and I remember he was in some random shorts, like no name brand, like old Reebok Nanos, I think, in certain events, and just slinging weight around. It's pretty impressive to see how he's developed and changed.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. Man, that he's put in the graft, as you guys would say. You know what I mean? Like that dude has worked hard, and I hope he sustains it. I hope because he is someone that at least from a surface level, from what I could tell, is willing to learn some things. And this year, I think this year coming up will be a good year for him. Even better.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. So that's really interesting. Are there any, on the flip side, are there any things that people that come to you they seem to just fall down on all the time? I know you mentioned not buying into the system.
Yeah, anytime I meet an athlete that's like, I'm gonna be world's strongest man or whatever, I'm like, oh boy, like I already know. And it's not even because they're not capable of it. It's not even that. It's just because again, it kind of goes back to the idea of like if you're focused entirely on a result and not a process, you're fucked. It's over because those are the first athletes to get frustrated with the first hurdle. Those are the athletes to not show up on a deload week, even though because it's boring. They're the first athletes to, you know what I mean? Like they don't have that mindset of just systems. It doesn't matter if it's my system or someone like MST or someone like Ben or whatever. There's a system there. And if you're not willing to just participate in it and let it develop and you get caught up on little things, you're not going to last. Again, anyone that's results orientated versus process orientated will fall apart.
That's really interesting. For some reason, Brian Shaw comes into my brain. Adam Bishop comes into my
Yeah.
brain. People that have got real longevity in the sport, and they all come across as data-driven people looking at processes and
Yeah.
incremental improvements.
Yeah, and look at what's happened with Luke Richardson. Luke Richardson was the definition of what I was talking about. A hyper talented, hyper athletic individual, probably focused too much on results. All right, and he fell down a lot over the last couple of years. But now, in the last year or so, he's become nothing but systems orientated. He's talking about PRs and reps and higher reps. He's talking about just his approach to recovery. Like he's so focused now, in my opinion, on the things that actually matter. And look at the results. Homeboy came back, won two giants, won a Europe's, and then won the World Tour final, right? And I hope that continues for him. He's maturing athletically at an exponential rate because the fact that he's fallen down so many times. Right. He had to go through it and he clearly has the determination and grit to not quit, right? Which is a very hard skill, but he's actually learning from these mistakes. He's actually learning. I go back and I think about athletes like Kevin Nee, who was at World's Strongest Man at like 19 or 20 years old. Fucking crazy. And people might not know who he is, but he's an American guy. And Kevin kept on getting injured and injured and injured. At one point, he had the world record deadlift, and then the next week blew out his hamstring. And like, he just it seemed like he didn't learn the things that someone like Luke Richardson did at basically the same ages, and he had two different results entirely.
That's crazy. Because yeah, a name like Kevin Nee does perfectly prove your point. And Luke
Yeah,
Richardson, that was Luke Richardson,
yeah, totally.
powerlifting standout. Came
Yep,
in with like a 400 kilo squat, aged like 19
crazy,
or something.
crazy stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And then he's joined MST now. That's really interesting. I
Yeah,
love
it's all
that
it's all
point.
systems, dude. Anyone that becomes process orientated and systems orientated will become something. Because at the end of the day, with strongman, it's never really the strongest guy who's winning, who's going to win. It's going to be who could last the longest and learn the most. Almost always ends up being the best.
Every competition seems like a war of attrition.
Yeah,
People drop out in event one, in event two. Can you stick around? you
Yeah,
know.
and like who's around for 8 years? Like right now, we're in the era of Hooper. It's fun, it's exciting. Who's going to be the person winning 8 years from now versus right now?
Mhm. What do you think the state of strongman will be in the coming years, like in the US, but also worldwide? Is it
You know,
growing? Is it shrinking?
some people are really kind of caught up right now under the mindset that it's shrinking, and I don't know if I agree with that. I have never seen more participation than before. And when you think about the sport, I think when people think of the sport, they kind of just default to the open men due to the largest promotions are open men, right? But I see local shows selling out all the time. I see amateur nationals in the US for both Strongman Corp and USS with 400 plus athletes per, you know what I mean? Like, so when I hear things like, oh, it's shrinking, I'm like, well, maybe sponsorship dollars at the very top end might be, which I think there is. There's a bit of a squeeze right now. But the sport as a whole, where it actually matters, if we're being honest, in my opinion, is growing rapidly.
That is definitely mirrored in the UK. There are small comps in the UK. Like, for instance, I'm from a place called Hampshire,
Mm.
very small place. You can drive across it in an hour and a half.
Mhm.
And Ben Glasscock runs a competition every year called Hampshire's Strongest. And across 2 days, weight classes, women, men, novice up to kind of, like a local open level,
Sure.
they will have 100, athletes. They will
That's
have,
crazy.
150 spectators across the 2 days. Um, and it's
Yeah,
how do we
so
transition that upwards?
well, I think it just does by default, in my opinion, because the more total participation, like we're seeing on this local level increase, the more talent is eventually going to spring on through. And when there's more people again locally supporting it, a lot of those folks tend to go to these larger shows. When a lot of folks go to the larger shows, more sponsors jump in. So I think it's already happening, and I think it happens naturally. I think due to mostly just the world economy, some of the major shows had to shrink a little bit, right? Because like everything's a little expensive right now. I think we all kind of feel that no matter where you're living. Um, but I think it's a blip. I do. I genuinely think it's just a bit of a blip. And I think in 5 years it's gonna be even bigger than now. And right now is the biggest it's ever been. So I think we all feel the immediate blip that I described there. But in totality, the sport's never been bigger. Like I mean, how many divisions were at OSG this year? Like Jesus Christ, like 14 divisions, right? Like you have teens, masters, disabled, like four different types of masters, open. Like you can't tell me it's shrinking. Like you can't. Like the numbers, I think would disprove. And once things like economy get a little better, then you'll have slightly more opportunities for the highest level. When companies are a little more willing to shell out cash. And again, how many times throughout human history has the economy taken a little bit of a dive and then bounced back? Like it's kind of a bit of a natural curve, in my opinion.
Yeah, things ebb and flow.
Yeah. But
Um,
I think overall, this graph is charting up.
for sure. But the things that grab the headlines probably influence, the
Yeah.
general public's opinion. And we've recently had some dramas at OSG regarding payments and stuff,
Yeah.
and then also Strongest Man on Earth being cancelled.
Yeah, man, you're going to see these unfortunate realities because of these blips, because of these economic squeezes. And in the case of Strongest Man on Earth, I think Brian was very honest with his assessment. He and his family, which are the main organizers at the end of the day, it's him and his wife, and close ones that are business or family, run that show. And I think that was a little bit more to do with emotional exhaust. If I'm being honest, I think it had a lot to do with that. So when I see things like Strongest Man on Earth being canceled, what I hope is the outcome is potentially just more hands coming in that Brian finds useful to him and the team to help mitigate some of those responsibilities. I hope that's the future of that. Because even he himself on his podcast at least admitted, he goes, yeah, they didn't. This is the first year that they lost money, but he also said, hey, it wasn't a lot of money, so it wasn't like he took a huge hit, thankfully. Um, but the emotional exhaust was high. So I'm hoping in his case, more hands are able to come in, more professional help, because ultimately, if you're willing to spend, up front, it's going to be a lot of money. But if you spend a lot of money, you bring in professionals or other professionals, I should say, to help run a show like that. Their ceiling will increase considerably over the course of, let's say, 3 to 5 years, and then that's when they bear some incredible fruits. Because you're putting on a show like that, you deserve to make a good amount of money, because the opportunities from it are far and wide. I mean, Jesus Christ, without Strongest Man on Earth, Lucas wouldn't have the things that he has. I mean, he's a full-time athlete basically because of that show. Like, between the sponsorship that came from it, the prize money that came from it, and the exposure, like that show allowed him to be a full-time strongman. And I think the original show that did that for most guys is World's Strongest Man, for example, right? But World's Strongest Man is backed by one of the largest global conglomerates on the planet. That's a hefty bank account, right? And even that show has experienced some extreme squeeze in terms of economic participation from that company. But when we see that, hopefully Brian can bring on some teams. When it comes to OSG, in my personal opinion, that was miscalculation on the organization side, and that's okay so long as people learn and people, powers that be learn from it. And I think they will. Um, the I have been very lucky enough to sponsor myself and help OSG for a number of years with some organizational things. So I have a pretty good insight on how that operation works. And I can tell you right now, firsthand, the people that run that show really care about the sport. And Lynn Morehouse himself has personally financed that show for a number of years from his personal bank account, well before this year. Um, I know for a fact he's done that. So I know he cares, and Lynn will have to sit back and take an honest look at it and assess things, and I believe that he will. And I think just a few organizational shifts turn that show from being in the red to comfortably in the green. No, they're not going to make millions of dollars because that show, in terms of viewership with crowds, has always been nothing. But because of the size of it, it should be totally fine.
One thing that people always seem to bring up is the UK versus US divide in terms of, in the UK, we have Giants Live, which is incredible, what Darren and
Yeah.
Colin have produced. And they're packing out arenas with 8, 9, 10,000 people 5, 6 times a year, right?
Yeah.
And in America, we don't seem to see that. And the solution that people tend to offer is, we'll just move it all to the UK. Uh,
Right.
you know, do you think that's a feasible solution? Or how do we translate that growth worldwide rather
You
than,
know, It's a great question, and I think to answer that, or at least to understand that, you kind of need to understand the context and why that even happened. I think context is kind of everything. And if we go back to the '70s, World's Strongest Man was always in the United States. It was a contest. It was a reality TV show by American producers and American people, and it stayed here for a long time. And ultimately, what happened? Franco Columbo, the bodybuilder, participated in one of the events, one of the much earlier events. I want to say one of the first three, and dislocated his knee in an event, which is a very popular clip online. You kind of see it everywhere. His knee literally fell out of place, and his leg was horrific. But Frank sued World's Strongest Man and won $1 million in like 1979 or 1981, in that range. Like, he won a fuckload of money, and because of that, the American company basically were like, "We're done with this show," and an English company bought it, got the rights to it. And so with that comes then the transition from World's Strongest Man, or Strongman as a whole at the time, was very American dominant. All the athletes that were winning were American. All the podium was almost exclusively American. The shows around it that weren't that show, the largest, were in North America. People forget, like, talking about the '80s, you go up to Canada. I live in Washington State now. You go up to Canada, and one of the most famous shows was one of the muscle power qualifiers just up in Victoria, Canada, and they pull in thousands of people just for spectators. Strongman really was huge in North America for a very long time. It was on the exact route that England is now at the end of, right? So with that transition, with it moving, you had larger opportunities happening over there. And then if you notice, if you watch the early World's Strongest Men, it goes from basically all Americans to then, oh, look at all these Brits, right? It shifts. You could see it. You can literally see it. And that's just because that company took over and they needed local talent. And then because it shifted, all these shows started popping up in the UK as a whole. All these qualifiers, all these athletes, right? So the growth shifted location. Um, so with that in mind, it's not shocking at all that now the largest participation over the last 20 years, let's say, nearly 30, is in the UK, because that's where it went. And now with a company like Giants Live, another English company, um, before that, I'm getting a little off tangent here, but whatever, I'll reel back in a moment. But then you had brilliant businessmen like Colin Bryce. Like, people forget, Colin Bryce potentially single-handedly saved the sport. And you really kind of have to look back in history. When Colin first got into Strongman, he was just a participant at first, but then he started hosting all these shows. He was an incredible announcer, interviewer. He was a commentator. He was a judge. Um, Colin essentially then, after it left the US, he picked up the rights to host shows that qualified for World's Strongest Man. And if you look at where were all those shows mostly based? They're called the Super Series. It was a company that he owned with Ode Haugen. Where are all those shows based? United States. Because that's where all the fucking athletes were. He had them all over Canada. He had them all over America. He had a huge one in Hawaii. And then he did have a few in Europe as a whole, but it was mostly North America. Um, that was a qualifying route. And then that company dissolved, right? IFSA started. Well, actually, no, it was a little bit later. And then once that company dissolved, Colin, being the businessman that he is, was like, no, 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 I'm not going to let this go. I'm going to start Giants Live. And then got the rights again to put on the qualifiers for this show. And then he partnered up with Darren, and then it exploded because Darren's a business savant. Like, Darren knows how to sell tickets and pack rooms. He's so talented at that. I will never hear anything otherwise. That man is incredible at that. Like, Jesus Christ, look at the shows that he puts on. So it just stayed this natural progression, qualifiers, qualifiers. And then they mostly honed in on the UK market, which how could I blame them? It's right in their back door. They grew a massive infrastructure. They end up buying their own equipment. They no longer had to borrow from different gyms or whatever. And we are where we are. So the original question was what? Like, why is it? What was your original question?
Well, that just that strongman is so big visibly in the
Yes,
UK
yes.
and the
Yeah,
crowd.
and ultimately that history, I believe, is why, right? They never got interrupted like the growth in the US got viciously interrupted. So I think that's why you have these incredible shows that I now have to go to 3 or 4 times a year. I have to fly to the UK and go coach at, which is great. They're all like the shows are always a great experience. And I implore any fan to go check him out. But that's ultimately why. But it started in North America, and the shows were fucking huge here, right? They were really huge. And then obviously years later, we can talk a little bit more about the history if you want. But years later, you had the Arnold series pop up, and the Arnold series shows in North America always had a huge like thousands of fans would come. Santa Monica being one of the most famous ones. They had the original North the Strongest Man, which was up in Quebec, Canada. Back then, I believe it was called the Gâteau Festival, and that was an Arnold qualifier, right? And that show, dude, they would have like 5,000 people in an outdoor arena watching this 8 to 12 event show where you had guys like Brian Shaw, Martin Licis, JF Caron, Hafthor Julius Bjornsson, Eddie Pritchett, anyone and everyone, Radzikowski, Zadru, anyone and everyone had been at that show in North America, and the fans were nuts. And now it's still North America's Strongest Man. It's in Victoriaville, and you'll still get like 1 to 2,000 people in an outdoor arena in a sunny day watching this show. So it's not dead in North America, and the opportunity is absolutely there, but it's just going to require a heavy bank account and someone with a vision. That's just the reality, right? So, but where it's gone in the UK is fucking awesome. Like it's you can't argue. Honestly, it saved the sport. Without it growing in the UK and people like Colin and Aaron, oof, man, it would be kind of a glim sport right now.
Mm. What do you see as being the match that sparks the flame then again? Because I know Giants Live came out to Vegas last year.
Yeah,
I was there, well, a year and a half ago. I was there. It didn't pack out, and I know they lost a
no.
lot of money.
Well, the idea was very good, in my opinion. They ultimately Vegas, why not, right? Huge international city. Who doesn't love Vegas? Like the idea was brilliant. I think a couple things could have been better. So, I have some family that live in Vegas. No one knew what was going on. No one had any idea, right? That's a problem. As a promoter, like the locals should know, right? Like that's a huge misstep. And Rogue has the exact same problem. When I've been to Scotland the last 2 years now to coach at Rogue Invitational, every cab driver, every local person I talk to, like, oh, why are you here? I'm like, oh, I'm here for the Rogue. They're like, what's that? Dude, if the locals don't know, come on. That's number one. And number two, the time of year they put it in was not advantageous for ticket sales. They put it during the school year. No, no, sorry. It was during the one of the breaks, one of the school breaks. What's every parent doing during a break? Like they're taking their kids to this activity, that activity, or they're traveling. They brought it during a dead time of year, which is probably why it was cheaper than other times of year to rent out arena. It's not going to make it easy for you to sell tickets. So, and that's not me like bashing Giants. Like clearly the company knows what the hell they're doing. but there's a lot of little things to do to fix it. And personally, I think if a company like Giants wanted to come to the United States and expand their market, which they totally could, Giants could take over North America. And if they do, you're going to see that company. They probably gross, if I had to guess, Giants probably pulls in anywhere from like 8 to maybe 12 million a year, if I had to guess, right? If they expand to North America, that number triples,
Yeah,
right?
exponent.
If they do it well. But I personally, I think the move in North America, you have to bring it to an expo first or a festival. Like if you look at all the most successful strongman shows in the United States and Canada that went from being a small show to a big show to a huge show, they all started at these festivals. Because I don't know what the culture is like in the UK, for example, but in America and in Canada, they call them fairs here, like county fairs, town fairs, state fairs. The culture of it is huge. Like you will have fairs that will bring in once a year 2 to 300,000 people over a weekend. Like a monstrous number, right? So that like fair culture here is huge, and that's why all the Canadian shows, the biggest ones, were all at fairs. They were at rodeos that were attached to a fair with a strongman show. So you kind of have to start there. That's where you kind of have to start. And for example, I know Rob Kearney. It's probably not public knowledge, but whatever. I don't care. I know Rob Kearney was trying to help Giants come to America at one point and bring it to a fair that's in Massachusetts that brings in a fuckload of people. And that was one of the first things they were looking at. And I think they probably should have done that. You start there, you sell 5,000 tickets, you go back there again, and then once the locals know, then maybe you pick a small arena and then you go a little bit. It's the exact same thing they did in the UK. You just have to start over again, right? You can't go, all right, well, we sold an arena in London. We should do it in Vegas. No, no, no. Bring it down. Sell first, right? Sell. Get the people knowing about it. Build the culture. And then you come back after 2, 3 years. Then you get that 10,000 person arena. Then you get that 5,000 person arena. You know what I mean? But you have to start somewhere where people are going to be, in my opinion. But what the fuck do I know? I'm just a coach.
No, I fully agree with you. And not to tell a story about my own life, but at Worlds in Sacramento, I feel like it was 2022, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah, they
Uh,
were there.
Myself and Ben Glasscock flew on over. He was just an amateur at that time. And we went out to just see it and experience it. And one morning of, I think the finals, I think there was a delay.
Mhm.
And we got, like Lime scooters and we scooted across Sacramento to this awesome breakfast spot. And the guy serving us, the waiter, he asked us why we were there. Why are you two Brits up in our
Yeah.
land? We kicked you out years ago. Um, and we said, oh, we're here to watch the strongman. We're here to watch World's Strongest Man. And he said, what do you mean? And he was probably about 22.
Right.
He said, what do you mean? I love strongman. And we were like, oh, that's awesome. And he said, why are you here for strongman? I love strong. And he started talking about Eddie Hall. And he started talking about Brian Shaw. And he
Right.
knew a lot about it. And I said, man, World's Strongest Man is in your city,
And he didn't know.
down the road, and he didn't know.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like you have to grow small and like you again, that there it is right there. If a 22-year-old who's obsessed with Eddie Hall doesn't know that the world's strongest man is in his town, there's a marketing error here.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a miss. There's a miscalculation.
yeah, for sure, man. I love that, and it's awesome to hear your insight into it because you are so entrenched at every level of the sport,
I am.
and a real historian. I'm hoping we can tap into that just before we wrap things up, man. And a challenge I've got for you. I want you to build me the perfect strongman. The rules are you can only pick active strongmen. So you
Sure.
can't pick Big Z, you can't pick Brian Shaw, um, and you can only pick each person once.
Sure. 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 Sure.
Okay. And the areas that I want you to select someone for each of them, obviously, we're going to have a deadlifter,
Yeah, sure.
someone's overhead, someone's grip, someone's loading. I know you're less of a fan of someone running with a sandbag, but pick someone who's good at sandbag runs,
Only if it's light.
someone to do the stones. And then also someone with the right mindset to compete,
Sure.
that athlete. And then finish this up with someone in the UK, we would say they've got the best rig. Who's got the best body? When they take
Yeah.
the shirt
Yeah. Yeah.
off, who is my wife swooning over?
You're right. 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 Right.
At the Royal Albert Hall this year, first strongman show she came to, Ben was competing, so we're there. And obviously Lucas was competing. We're
He
there
was.
cheering from the rafters. Pavlo Koriaka took his shirt off.
Every
And
woman.
my wife said, who's that man? And I said, his nickname is Handsome. So I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, kick us off, man. Who's going to be your
Sure.
deadlifter?
let's start deadlifting, which I think is one of the most boring events at this point. It is bring back squats. Um, Deadlifter. Wow, man, because ultimately you need someone who's well-rounded, right? You don't want just the biggest repper with reps or just the biggest total. I mean, honestly, he's active. You got to go Thor. No one on the planet's going to beat him in deadlift. It doesn't matter if Mitchell Hooper peaks or any of the deadlift championship guys. It's going to be Thor for the deadlifts. It'd be really remiss to to not pick him for that. And then the next event, you said
Give me an
overhead.
overhead.
It's funny. Everyone probably just assumed right away, like, oh, Lucas. But Lucas has holes in his overhead. Yeah, well, he has a hole. So you want to pick someone again who's generally really good, right? Oh, who's generally? You know who I'm going to go with? Who has the least amount of holes in overhead? Trey Mitchell. It's Trey because like Trey will beat Lucas on Viking and Axel.
Hmm.
Lucas's biggest hole in overhead is his axle clean. Other than that, he's the best overhead athlete in the world, but he has a deficit,
Hmm.
right? So I'm actually gonna go Trey.
Okay.
So
Then
we
give
got
me
Thor
grip.
deadlift, grip. Oh, Reno Nell, easy, easy. People think Mark Felix has crazy hands.
Hmm.
Go look at Reno Nell's hands. It's the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life. It is absurd. It makes no sense. Reno Nell's grip every day of the week.
I love it. Give me
Uh,
loading.
Loading. So when I think of loading, I think of like odd objects. I think of like random things, sandbags, kegs, whatever, right? Heavy, light. Um, I'm gonna go 2019 Tom Stoltman. 2019
Specific.
Tom Stoltman. Yeah, I want that loader. That loader was crazy.
Hmm.
And then what else we got? It was at
Well, we
Stones.
got we got Stones, and you've just burned Tom Stoltman.
I did because I don't think he's the best at Stones. Oh, and he's not. I can prove it as well. He's not the best at Stones.
Let's dive in, man. Who are you picking? Who's the best?
You're gonna laugh,
Hmm.
but this person has never lost to Tom Stolman ever in Stones. He's always beaten him. So this person competed against Tom, I think 5 times now at Stone events and has never lost to him. And people keep forgetting this. And you're gonna laugh. It's Lucas Hatton. Tom
Really?
Stolman has never been able to beat Lucas in Stones. Not in series, not in odd object, not in max, nothing. Not in shoulder. He's never beaten him. So I'm picking Lucas for Stones.
That's blown my mind.
Lucas is actually one of the best stone loaders on the planet, and no one gives him praise for it. It's so weird. When it comes to max, series, natural, shouldering, he's absolutely, I think, the best well-rounded stone loader.
Wow, he did kill it at the Rogue.
Yeah, he took second by like 0.3 seconds on that event.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
he's beaten Tom at the Rogue Stones. He's beaten Tom at the Arnold Stones twice. He's beaten Tom at Stones at Shaw. They didn't get to go against each other at the World's final because that fat ass didn't make the final. But but yeah, I'm actually gonna pick Lucas for Stones.
And then mindset. Who's got that mentality, the killer mentality?
Oh, dude, peak Novikov, peak Novikov. No one is getting past that guy.
Oh, I love that.
And in a very close second, but he's not active, so it doesn't matter. It would be Derek Poundstone, but peak Novikov.
Yeah, Novikov coming back for Europe's Strongest Man in a few months.
I wish him the best. I hope he's doing okay.
Yeah, man. He was one of my first favorite strongmen.
Oh, dude, I remember when I first got into the sport. I first got into sport in 2019 as a coach and like someone actively participating. I was a fan as a kid, but I didn't really know the names. It was just something that came on TV at ESPN at 2 in the morning, right? Um, but yeah, he Novar it was 2019, and I watched him at the Arnold, and I was like, "Who is this tiny guy just keeping up with these dudes, whooping ass?" So yes, it was Novikov.
I love that, man. And the final thing, the best body, the best rig in strongman.
So he's technically active, though just newly coming back. But I think anyone that doesn't say 2021 or 2022 Pavlo Nechkanechki is out of their mind.
Wide Pavlo.
Bro, that guy, I was coaching at Arnold 2021 or two, I can't remember. And it was his first year there, so someone will tell me which year it was. Holy fuck. That dude, when he took his shirt off, I was like, that can't be legal. That's illegal. There's no way this is allowed. His kneecaps were his knee joint was as big as my torso. The dude had lats on his lats and abs at 420. I was like, what are you? What are you? It didn't make sense, bro. It didn't make sense.
That's
Yeah, I'm going with Pablo
incredible.
Nechkinechki.
A lot of your selections surprised me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say I'm an idiot, but that's okay. I'm used to that.
No, man, opinions are beautiful. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to briefly cover and touch on the tragic news today about Para Dwyer
Yeah.
and your thoughts on his time in the sport and how he inspired people. And
Dude, man, it really, what's fun, what was and what hopefully remains to be fun about an individual like Pa is that he was a spark. Like you will love him or you will hate him, but you always kind of end up endearing the guy. Like he had this charisma about him that was very palpable. And it was really fun over the last couple of years to kind of see him express himself online using that exact character trait to expand the sport. Because my God, the guy had an Instagram following that went from like 20,000 to like 400,000 or whatever the heck it was in just a span of a year or two, and that was because of that charisma. And on top, and that really grew kind of after he was coming down from the sport in terms of like high level participation. But even at high level, I mean, people forget 2021 Britain's Strongest Man. Paul Dwyer was putting the smoke on Tom Stoltman. He came second in that show, and he was close. Like he had to go against the world's strongest man at the time, and he was kicking ass. I don't think anyone anticipated that performance out of him. That's one of my favorite performances. I've watched that Britain's Strongest Man like at least 3 or 4 times because it was such a fun show. And Paw really, I honestly kind of think he got snubbed at some of the bigger shows that year. I think he should have been invited to some of them because his performance was outstanding. Now, no one would say Paw was like one of the best ever, but when he was on, holy shit, was he hard to compete against, especially if it was more dynamic. Think Conan's wheel, think dumbbell or axle. Even if the axle was heavy, like he was so fun to watch, and he wasn't the biggest man. I think Paw was maybe 6 foot tall, maybe. Probably only weighed about 130 to 140 kilos. He wasn't particularly large, but he was powerful, extraordinarily powerful. And he reached his peak much later in life. I want to say he was like 36 or 38 when he really kind of hit his peak as an athlete, which is cool, because he started much later in life. I want to say he started in his early 30s, going through the ultimate strongman scene and doing really well at UK's and eventually Britain's and then going to Worlds. But yeah, it's going to leave a massive gap in the sport. His unfortunate departure from life, and it's very sad. And I do hope I hope there's incredible things to learn from him that people pick up on in terms of not only just being a good showman, but I think what we were seeing, his last few posts, maybe a dozen or so posts on Instagram, he went from, kind of like those takedown style stories where he was defending people to more of like sharing uplifting stories and things like that. And so you kind of saw like the evolution of a man right in front of you and putting value in what actually matters as his, what is now his last portion of life. And at the end of the day, I just hope his family the best. He was a dad. His kids weren't very old; they're very young, and it's very sad. And I hope maybe one day as those children age, they get to meet these coaches and athletes and promoters that found extreme friendship and value in Pa. And I hope they're able to understand who their father was through that, and what his participation did to a massive community. I hope they get to feel that. But that's pretty much all my thoughts on that. It's literally today that we all found out, so it's unfortunate.
I fully agree with you, man. I think you expressed that beautifully. I think obviously he had this wonderful strongman career, huge online presence, funny guy, creating wonderful content of all types. But he was a father of a young family,
Yeah,
kids who are going to look up to him no matter what because dad's dad. And I'm sure, I didn't know Pa, but I'm sure he would want his legacy to be those beautiful kids growing up and, like you said, finding out about their dad and learning about who he was as a man as well as a father.
yeah. I really do hope that's the case. And there's an internet footprint with him now, and they get to watch just how utterly ridiculous he was, and just how funny he was, and also just how committed he was. Like, you know, when Paul did something, like when he decided to be good at strongman, he got very good very fast. When he went down this route recently through bodybuilding, he looked like a Greek god the last year. he looks incredible. So I genuinely hope they pick up the more important thing from him, just as a person and man, is like if you do something, do it fully, commit, and then make overall a positive impact in your community. And it's hard to say Paul didn't exemplify all of those attributes.
Really nicely said, man. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Alec, thank you so much for your time, man. This has been beautiful. It's a real pleasure to have you on. And we've all appreciated hearing your thoughts about Strongman Worldwide. And yeah, it's been
yeah,
great.
man, it's always I love it. I just hope, people find some value in these sort of things. I love interviews like this. Before we started recording, we talked about how we love just the sport, right? And getting to know individuals in the sport, whether it be athletes, coaches, or otherwise. I could say now I have three and a half favorite English athletes. Ben's now one of them. Me and Luke have three and a half. It's Ben, it's Luke Richardson, it's Shane Flowers, and half the time, Patty. So
That's awesome. I'm pleased to hear my boys made the list.
yeah, we love that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Alec.
Thank you, brother.